this afternoon. How are you, Melissa?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm great.
Melissa, I'm just going to say like a little word of introduction, and then I know you have some images to share, and then we'll just kind of get into conversation. So for those who do not know Melissa, she is a multidisciplinary visual artist, professor, and curator of special projects who was in and currently still resides in Columbus, Ohio. Vogley Woods has been nominated for the National USA Fellowship. She's received 2 Ohio Arts Council individual artist grants, as well as the Greater Columbus Artist Grant. And she has also been doing some residencies. The Mass MoCA residency has been awarded, the Vermont Studio Center residency, and the Wassaic Project Summer residency, kind of among them. And of course, your work has been shown kind of all over the place, and certainly all over the place around here, including at the Wexner Center for the Arts, the Denison Museum, Columbus Museum of Art, and the Weston Art Gallery in Cincinnati. So, so with those kind of bona fides out of the way, I can say welcome once again. Oh yeah, I also have a trivia question that I was going to post at the beginning for our viewers who can win a $25 gift certificate to Locks, I believe. And the question this afternoon is, what well-known Mexican muralist artist led a failed assassination attempt against Leon Trotsky 80 years ago this week in May 1940? So I guess you can send your answers in as we are talking. And yeah, I know people have actually quite enjoyed those trivia questions, so it's great.
Awesome.
But again, how are you today, Melissa?
Hello, I'm great. I am in my garage studio here at home, working on a series of cyanotypes, which you can see in the background.
Cyanotypes are like blueprints, essentially.
Yeah, and it's a chemical process. I've never used it before. It's new to me, and so it's very exciting. Here's you can see a detail of one of the pieces I'm working on. I use this material. I'm using this material because this series of work that I'm doing relates to a project that I just finished called Always, that took place on my house, that had to do with light. Or basically the absence of light. And this project now has to do with the presence of light, because you need the sun to create the image. And then you use blocking. I use these cutouts like these that I have to block the light and to make some image.
I didn't realize that you were using a kind of a stencil or a kind of cutout.
Yes.
That allows you to, you know, I mean, I was thinking actually that they look, you know, they seem to sort of like reference in a way, at least Robert Rauschenberg's cyanotypes. I don't know if you're familiar with.
I looked at his. Yeah, I looked at his work, and Kiki Smith has a series of cyanotypes, as well as the artist who did the clock piece, 24-hour clock, and I'm blocking on his name at the Wexner Center. So there's a number of, I was surprised to see how many people have done cyanotypes, like a series of cyanotypes, and Rauschenberg was one of the ones I looked at. Yeah, he used whole people and created windows, which is interesting because this work is also referencing the light that comes through the Always installation that you can't see from the outside. So it's kind of about the windows and the imagery you can see in the window.
Cool. So actually, let's share the screen. And,
okay.
And let's see, there we are. I'll go full screen mode. There we are. So there you go. So tell us a little bit more about what we're seeing.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So this is the Always right at the beginning of response to the condition that we were in, I really wanted to look back historically at a time that was very similar to this moment, to try to kind of express a connection to that time and to sort of give people a sense that we have been through this before, and there's ways to get through it, and that there will be an end to this time. Because it was really, in the beginning, people were very distraught. And so I thought it was important to just make some art that people could see. And what I had at my what I had access to was my house and this vinyl, which I had from a project that I did in 2010 of another house installation with this material. And this material is a high density reflective vinyl, and all of the shapes were hand cut and put into all the windows. The design that you see is by the artist Raoul Dufy. And this artist created this pattern in 1920. And this is the original drawing of the pattern that you see in the purple and black. And he created this design exactly in 1920, which was the year that the Spanish flu ended. And so I wanted to project that ending moment for our beginning time dealing with the same condition, to give some hope and to give some direction that we can see the end's coming. So that was the initial idea. Yeah.
I found it interesting that you chose such a sort of like effusive and sort of verdant kind of botanical image to relate to that. I mean, the pandemic is something like that has, I don't know, revealed a kind of vulnerability in terms of our relationship to nature.
Yes.
So to do something that is kind of a stylized version of a kind of nature, I think was an interesting choice.
Yeah, it was. I'm sorry?
Tell me about the title as well.
Oh, yeah, the title was pulled from a Lee Krasner quote. While I was thinking about the patterning and the work, I also am a painter, so I'm always just kind of interested in what painters have to say. And I listened to an old interview by Lee Krasner, and she was talking about the condition of women working under patriarchy, basically, and that the interviewer had asked her a question about being ignored for this one show, and then how it was to be a woman painter at that time. And she said, she just had one word. She just said, always, 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 you know? And so just that word always just clicked in my mind to really connect to this work in terms of like, for many levels, because I like my work to kind of reference this notion of that there's a structural hierarchy that is fictitious and formed on needs for status and power. And so it became interesting and important to me to connect to her words as well as to the Dufy design. And the Dufy design was also kind of important about the boldness. I wanted it to be really dominant because there were many other designs and things to decide on, to like look through. I had a lot of other references that I could have pulled from, but this piece in particular, the boldness of it was important to be striking and to be visually striking to the viewer immediately when they see it.
It is super striking, you know, in the evening with any kind of light source on it.
Yes. Yeah, so if you look at it, these two images that you see now are photographs taken with a cell phone camera with the flash on. If you don't have the flash on, it just looks like a house at night. You can't quite tell. You can barely see that there's something there. But this is using a flash. Even if the lights are on in my house, the whole thing lights up as if it's like electric. It's like a neon response. It can be taken from the car driving by. You can also use the flash on your video. And it's very surprising to people. And it's really a little magical. And that thing that you saw is only yours and it's in your phone. Even if a person uses a flash or even a flashlight, and if you're standing away from them, like you can't see the light. It comes directly back to you only. So it's very personal in that way.
Right.
Yeah. And so these pictures are interesting because it is like maybe it's 7 o'clock at night. You can see the sun in the shadows. So it's not at night, but the person taking the photograph, this is my brother, Matt Vogley. He used a color. He used color. There's a truck going by. He used a color cellophane on the flash, and it turned all the windows a color, but it didn't turn the house a color. So that's that's something, if you want to bring a little piece of plastic and just put it over your flash, it'll turn the windows a color like that. And it gives more control to the viewer, and it lets them own it in a different way. This image is similar in that it used a reflective vinyl that has kind of a rainbow reflected quality in it stuck onto the camera, and it just created this really wild interpretation of the piece. And every photo is totally different and looks totally different. That's an interesting and kind of surprising thing that I found. And then just about, every day someone will come by, and sometimes I see people constantly reading. I have little signs out front talking about the piece, talking about the history and like how I came to see it. And then people come and take photos. It's great.
Do you want to reveal the address?
Oh yeah, it is 964 Neal Avenue between 1st and 2nd. So that's 964 Neal Avenue. You can find more information on my website, and I'm going to keep this piece up until social distancing has ended. So it may be up for a while. It may not. I don't know. I'm just at the whim of nature, really, with that. Yeah. This image is a drive-by shot. So you can kind of see the motion of the camera. Just using a cell phone again. This was at night. What's really interesting is that I find is interesting is that the forms kind of expand out. So while the actual image, the actual pattern is actually very thin, in the photograph, the light, the reflection of the light kind of makes the forms all pop out and expand.
I like that this is kind of a photographic project as much as a kind of sculptural one with your own house. That it's like part of the piece is the photograph that exists in everyone's phone.
Yeah. At first, I really was thinking a lot about pattern and decoration and how that holds a different kind of presence. And then that was kind of my focus on thinking about the piece until, and I knew it would be existing in a camera, but it didn't really fully come to me until once I got the work up that it was actually a photographic project, and really speaks about light and capturing of an image. And so that's why I went to the cyanotypes as my next step, to kind of manifest that expression, manifest this like capturing of light, and what is it about light and dark, and how many layers can I build and kind of obliterate what is before it, and how I'm interested in kind of showing this struggle with the medium. I'm not familiar with it, so it's really like a little bit terrifying to work with, because I can blow out a whole image, and I'm not using a timer, and I'm using only the sun. So I'm really just going with chance and with time and the amount of time that I just kind of feel it out, and I just feel like I'm really fighting against time and fighting to keep the image present, and that conflict and that contrast is going to kind of come out in the work a little bit. Yeah, these images here are in process. This is in process.
This is in process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of them. They have multiple layers of cyanotype going on.
I see.
Yeah. And so this piece really connects to the cutouts. So the cyanotype, which is this ephemeral light-based thing, this is like the exact opposite. this is scaiola. It's a kind of ancient plaster technique that I learned about 3 years ago, and I had to go to Italy to study it. And it mimics marble, and the figures that you see here are pulled from Greco-Roman wrestlers. And that is where I take my imagery for figures. It's in my paintings, it's in the wrestlers, it's in the sculptures, and it's in these cyanotypes. I'm really interested in how a figure can be, how elements of the figure can get pulled out of this action that's it's really from a photograph as well. And a lot of my work does pull from photography, but these are taken off the internet from like Olympic wrestling stills and photographs. And then I manipulate the forms. I feel like they hold a lot of information in them based on tension and conflict. And I really, in my work, like to talk about conflict and tension and the conflict within, but also the conflict with time and with history and how it's been written and how that manifests bodily in people and how people perform that manifestation. So I translate that in a lot of different ways. But right now I'm really focusing on these wrestlers and direct dissections out of the poses. So once you know that these are pulled from wrestling moves, you can start to kind of maybe see that in the work. If you don't know that, which it's not important that you know that, it feels more like a body in tension or held in space. And so with the paintings, I think of them as a timeline, and the figures are struggling within that timeline. So as I'm building the layers, these paintings take many months to finish because there's many, many layers and building an overlap and cutting in and out. And the way that I work with painting feels very much to me like collage. And because the sources are photographic, that's one way that they're collage. But in another way, it's about overlap and what is being cut in and cut out. And where do I cut something and where do I overlap it? And that's really a dominant part and a dominant language that I use in the painting. Then there's color, which touches on many different things, from landscape to like acidic acids to light, to different kinds of light. And I'm trying to create these different sorts of conditions for the figures, and how are they going to navigate that? Yeah.
You also work in various forms of sculpture. There's scaiola in here as well, though. Is there not? Yeah.
Yes, there is. Yeah, that's a little scaiola block. So with scaiola, I think of it as a solid painting also sometimes, because it's pigment and plaster mixed together. But then when I show it sculpturally, sometimes it's on the wall and it feels a little bit more like a painting almost. But when it's on the ground, it really talks to like marble in a garden. This work, I was really thinking about a cloistered garden, like a closed off garden, like a private garden space, and trying to get that feeling that you're alone in your own, like alone in your own room kind of feeling, or that you're, no one's going to disturb you, and that you can just wander. And that was sort of the feeling I wanted to capture with this. And that was really influenced out of me looking at the unicorn tapestries in New York, which is a whole nother thing.
I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see, I think, you better.
Yeah. Hello.
I think the screen share was monopolizing the screen, as our viewers saw. But I thought it's fascinating that the Greco-Roman wrestling in your work, and there's a really formal competition amongst all of the different layers and elements in your work. As you said, you kind of described it like a collage, but also the composition itself is so expansive and kind of all over in its way, and the kind of like multiple competing elements. And I thought the kind of reminded, like when you mentioned that you were working with sort of wrestling as a motif, it kind of reminded me of the kind of formal quality of all of the different elements of the painting itself, kind of wrestling for your attention.
Oh yeah, certainly. I feel like, and I've been looking actually at Lee Krasner's work and other, I've also been looking at Jackson Pollock. It's just really about this overall composition, and then the conflict within that, and how things can just fight each other. So I do use a lot of painting references with that. And it's just, like, I don't want you to know where to go. I don't want your eye to know where to go. And I want you to get lost in it. So I do a lot of like trickery with the images to just get you to just sort of lose yourself a little bit in the work. And like the longer you look at a piece, the more things you'll see in it, which is interesting for me anyway.
And tell me about, I know that a lot of your work references a sort of classical or sort of imperial Roman past. In the exhibition that we did together at as part of the Greater Columbus exhibition, you painted on the walls these sort of Roman archways that acted as a kind of backdrop to your paintings. And it was a very subtle and also really lovely kind of sculptural treatment of the space, I thought. But those those elements of kind of classical Roman kind of iconography almost, or architectural motifs, end up in your painting as well. And now with the kind of Greco-Roman wrestling added in there, tell me about sort of how you draw inspiration from the classical in particular.
Yeah, it started with my interest in Emperor Domitian, and how he's actually kind of a little bit like Trump in a way. Like he was just a really little bit of a crazy ruler, leader. And I was interested in looking for a symbol that could kind of represent dominance and also represent something historic that has traveled through the time, it's something that represents classical, this notion of the classic. Like the one true classic, this is classical. The whole idea of dominance and power structures. And it really came to, I started reading about the arch, the form of the arch and how it was made, but then also how Emperor Domitian, used the arch in his own palace as a way to project his divinity. And that projecting of divinity and his attempt at trying to become a god was sort of like the catalyst for me to move into using and all of this classical information for my own uses. And it was him in particular because like all of his relatives had died and he had no one to deem him as a god. So he was left to create this like structure, this architectural structure to make him that way, and it just felt so false and fake, and that is really just, I really got attracted to that. And he would stand in the archway in his own house all the time, and he also made it so that you could see that no one would come behind him. So it was a really unusual distinction in his palace to have these archways made in every single room, these niches where he would like hang out, and just so odd. So I had to even go to Rome. I went to Rome to see the arches, and so I keep using them as a menace. They also act as like an echo in time. They have different forms in the work depending on what I want them to. Sometimes they're kind of weak. They have all these different ways of being in the work.
how is it that you, I mean, it's funny because I was first introduced to your work as video.
Oh, yes.
You made several videos, which also actually, now that I hear you talking about Domitian and his body sort of being framed by the architecture of this space. The videos that you made were models, essentially your feet, sort of walking through models of architectural spaces like the Wexner Center.
Yes.
And it just made me, I guess I have two questions out of that. But the first is, how do you move between different media, and how do you decide, like, oh, this is sculptural, this is painting, this is I have an idea for a video.
Yes.
Moving between media is a thing, actually.
Oh, it's hard. It is a challenge. But I think that it's hard. It's hard, but it's like, I can't not do it. So I have to do it. One thing has to be this one thing, and the other thing has to be the other thing. Like the last show that I did, there was video, sculpture, and painting, the show at Kent State. And the video had to happen because it had to be this performed manifestation of total internalness. And so I couldn't make that feeling any other way than to do a video. So the video had to be in there. And then the paintings are more visceral and you see them, but then the sculptures are more like they're just an object and you can see the weight and you can look all around them. So I'm so into all of these different ways of experiencing that I just have to use them all. And the idea really dictates which thing I'm going to do. Just like the cyanotype, like the idea dictated that I needed to do cyanotype. It just really had to be about light. And also I use this blue a lot in my work as a way to kind of reclaim the blue and it's really like, I like Reese Klein, but it's about reclaiming that blue from him. Or giving the power to the model. Like I used the blue in the Wexner piece to give the power back to the model. And I didn't want the model to be a classical model. I wanted the model to be like a little bit more perverted, and like I wanted to use the stereotype. So the idea just took me to that place, and it had to be that. It had to be messy. It had to spill and be kind of stereotypical and sexy dancing and then disturbing at the end. So, yeah.
I mean, some of that, a lot of your work, I would say, is like, well, gender plays a role in a lot of your thinking around the kind of wellspring of ideas in your work. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think I respond to everything through the body that I am and through my experiences. And so being a woman and identifying as a woman has really framed all of that for me, as that is my experience. And everything is then filtered through that. So I am able to wield a lot of more feminine esque, or you would be calling them like stereotypically feminine gestures and movements, and then also ignore them. Like I have a full range that I can go from because I have the way that the way that I am. So that's really where it comes out of. And it connects to my interest in history and like the erasure of peoples and the erasure of ways of being, and then the hierarchy of ways of being and the hierarchy of how people are deemed and valued. And really that value structure is something that I really gravitate towards and thinking about a lot. But my work has been moving a little bit more away from overtly gendered in its figures, except and maybe some in the performances, but it's still there. It's still very much there. I look at a lot of women artists intentionally. So it's important. It's an important part of the work. Yeah.
I have two. I see it's 4:00 now, but I have two more questions.
Okay.
And one is kind of a prosaic, kind of standard interview question, but I think it's also kind of an interesting one. It kind of reveals something. But I was wondering when and how you first started to think of yourself as an artist.
Always. This is funny. My mom was an artist. She's a portrait artist. And I decided in kindergarten, I was always going to be an artist. So I even decided that school was not important. And I would sit in class and they would give me an assignment and I would just be like, in my mind, that does not relate to being an artist. And I would not do it. I failed second grade. I failed it. Second grade. So I just knew, I always knew. That was just what it was going to be. And I'm sure it's because my mom was an artist and both my grandparents on both sides also made art. One was a steel worker and one was a barber, but they also made art. And so it was just like the thing and I was good at it. I think if you're good at something when you're young, you lock in. It's just totally it's always how it's going to be. It's always going to be this.
Always.
Yeah, always.
Actually, speaking of always, I should mention that you have been commissioned by the Columbus Museum of Art to create a new iteration of Always at CMA.
That is
yes, that is in collaboration with my colleague Anna Lee, and I'm delighted that you're both taking that forward.
Yes.
So look for more details around our opening in mid-June.
Yes, and also I'll be at a show at Hammond Harkins showing the cyanotypes, June 6th.
Awesome.
And so all of these cyanotypes, which you can see here, will be on display June 6th. So come on by. There's going to be like social distance viewing and all those things.
Cool.
Yeah.
My last question, the one that I've asked in all of these interviews is, people have been, in this kind of weird period where so many people are at home and there's been so many social media kind of creativity challenges and museums pushing these out, take an image of yourself as a famous painting or as a painting in your local museum. But I was curious if you might have a kind of proposition for something simple that people might do to kind of disrupt the everyday and to sort of bring something different and creative into their own space.
Yeah, I'll make art in your windows. Just start taping things up into your windows. Do all of your windows in your whole house. And then people, when they walk by, they'll see it. And then they won't see it right away, but they'll see it eventually. And then you can just take it back down. And it also makes beautiful shadows on the inside of your house. So I would use your windows. It's a gallery. You can light it up from behind. You could use stuffed animals and set up a whole scene. And then when your room is lit, it'll be like backlit and Christmas lights and whatever. Like, let's do this because everyone's coming outside now. So now's the time to decorate, put some art up in your windows and share it. That's my advice.
That is awesome. I mean, in this moment, we kind of, I think we do need to rethink what our domestic space is, what our, we've been forced to sort of encounter that a lot more recently than, at least, those of us who are like 9-to-5ers are spending so much more time at home, and that entails so many new dynamics of the everyday, of relationships, of all of this. And and to kind of focus your energy on something that is, new and different and creative, I think is really kind of generative and sort of generous.
Oh yeah.
With yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I will follow that up. Everyone should make areas in your house, make like stage different areas and give them different moods. And then you can go to those different areas and you feel like you're different. We've been doing that at our house. We've been making areas like the plant area with the chair. It's nice. You can escape.
That's fantastic. Well, Melissa Vogley Woods has just flown by, but it is always great to see you.
Yes.
And I look forward to your show at Hammond Harkins, and also certainly to living with Always CMA.
Oh my God, I'm so excited about the CMA. Always CMA is going to be fabulous. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. It's really a pleasure.
And thank you everyone who's tuning in. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope someone got the prize on the trivia.
Yeah, I'm gonna repeat that trivia question just at the end here, as I was asked to do so. But what artist led a failed assassination attempt against Leon Trotsky in May 1940? All right. Hint.
Okay. Yay. Right. Thank
Great
you.
To see you.
Bye.
Take care. And take care, everyone out there.